GoForThe2.com. These are our Week 7 predictions. We're going to get into them in a couple of seconds. Let's just talk about the Thursday night game. Arizona traveling to Colorado. We'll have a written breakdown and a prediction for that game Thursday morning on our website, GoForThe2.com, under the NCAA pick section. The Friday night game, Navy traveling to Central Michigan. We'll have a written breakdown and prediction for that game as well up on our website Friday morning, so check that out. Let's get right into the predictions for this weekend. Let's start with the big one that we broke down. Stanford traveling to Notre Dame to take on the 7th-ranked Fighting Irish. I'm not sold on quarterback Josh Nunez at this point. I know he had a breakout performance last week. However, I think the Notre Dame defense is one of the best in the nation. I think the fans will be up into this game, and I think Notre Dame gets the victory at home. That rushing attack led by Theo Riddick, George Atkinson III, and Sierra Wood, which picked up 376 yards last week, will wear down Stanford's front seven. I'm calling for a 35-17 Notre Dame victory as they inch closer to a national title berth. They're 5-0 coming into this game. They will be 6-0 and maybe move up a little bit higher should anybody get knocked off in the top 5. So keep an eye out for that. Notre Dame picks up the victory over Stanford and a dominant performance as they move to 6-0 with a 35-17 victory over Stanford. We called for an upset in Lubbock. We wrote about it already. We said it. We made the podcast. We're talking about the upset in Lubbock, Texas this weekend. Red Raiders get the upset over West Virginia. A shocking upset. West Virginia's been scoring at will. They're averaging 52 points per game, but they do have back-to-back road games now to the state of Texas. It's homecoming at Texas Tech. The Red Raiders defense is very underrated, only surrendering 210 yards per game, and more importantly, only giving up 92.6 yards rushing per game. That should be able to hold West Virginia's offense in check a little bit. I mean, I'm still calling for West Virginia to score 30. I just think Texas Tech at home has success running the football and pulls off the upset on a much maligned West Virginia defense. They're surrendering 35 points per game. We think the Red Raiders pull off the upset and they get a 35-30 victory at home over the 5th-ranked Mountaineers, who have Kansas State the following week at home. So could West Virginia be looking ahead? I think they are, and I think they lose on the road to at Lubbock 35-30. Let's talk about Louisville moving on the road to play Pittsburgh. Keep in note that's an 11 o'clock start for Louisville and Pitt. It's at Heinz Field. Louisville did have a week off to prepare for this game. I believe that they are the best team in the Big East. I know Rutgers is undefeated, but I think Louisville and head coach Charlie Strong has a very dominant defense. I like the quarterback of sophomore Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a star in the making, and I think Louisville's running game with Jeremy Wright and Sonorisi Perry will get some yards on the Pitt defense. And I think that Louisville picks up a dominating win on the road. They haven't won there in a couple of years. They've been upset by Pittsburgh over the last 3, but the week off will benefit Louisville, and I'm calling for a 35-20 Cardinal victory on the road. Let's stay in the Big East. Rutgers playing Syracuse. I'm not sold on Rutgers right now at this point. I know that they're undefeated. I know they beat up on UConn. They have a very opportunistic defense. They're going to be tested this weekend by Ryan Nassib and Syracuse. Syracuse did pick up their first Big East victory and knock off Pittsburgh for the first time in 8 years. They're going to have a very emotional performance this week. That's a good note winning at home against Pitt. They got the monkey off their back. They now have another Big East game to build on that victory. Look for Ryan Nassib to have a very good game, and the running game should get going against Rutgers. On top of that, when you look at Syracuse, they're 2-3, but they did play Northwestern. Very tough. They lost in the last minute. They played USC in that sophisticated passing game. Very tough in East Rutherford, New Jersey. And they lost to Minnesota, who, believe it or not, is 4-1. So those are their 3 losses. Syracuse did play very well in those games. They should be in this game in East Brunswick. and New Brunswick for Rutgers. I'm calling for the upset. I think Syracuse pulls off a 24-20 victory at Rutgers this weekend. Another game that we're going to talk about, Kansas State and Iowa State. Colin Klein, the all-purpose quarterback for the Wildcats. They're sitting at number 7. They've beat up on teams. They beat up on their in-state rival last week, Kansas. They abused Charlie Weiss. Now they must travel to Ames, Iowa to take on Iowa State and head coach Paul Rhodes. Iowa State very underrated. They knocked off TCU last week. TCU was without their starting quarterback, Casey Pakal, who did get arrested for a DUI, but it's still an impressive victory on the road at TCU. Now they come back home. They play Kansas State. Look for the fans to be into this game. Kansas State ranked 7th. Are they looking ahead a little bit towards the West Virginia game? You remember last year Oklahoma State went to Ames and lost. Kansas State could be in a tougher game than people think. I'm calling for the upset in Ames, Iowa. Iowa State and Paul Rhodes pull off the upset again this year in 2012. They knock off Colin Klein. They play a very physical style of defense, and they do have good secondary players in the secondary there for Iowa State. They get the upset over Kansas State, calling for a 35-31 victory by Iowa State this weekend. Talk about one more team that's sort of been under the radar. We haven't been high on them, but we think that they win this week. USC and Lane Kiffin traveling to Washington to take on his former buddy and pal, Steve Sarkisian. You remember when both of these coaches were the offensive coordinators for Pete Carroll. They both called plays for USC and Matt Leinart. Now, Steve Sarkisian knocked off Lane Kiffin the first year. Kiffin got his revenge last year. They won 40-17 at home in USC. Now they travel on the road where they haven't not looked good this year. USC and Matt Barkley got off to a very slow start. They got knocked off by Stanford. They had a lackluster performance last week against Utah and the week before against California. They do have a lot of injuries, but I just think that Washington and head coach Steve Sarkisian has a very inexperienced team, and Matt Barkley, Robert Woods, Marquise Lee should have enough offense to exploit the holes in Washington, and Lane Kiffin gets the win on the road. A dominating performance. You're going to see if he has the opportunity, Lane Kiffin to run up the score, and I'm calling for a 40-10 victory by USC. Still not sold on USC as a whole. Think they're overrated, but in this game, USC does have more talent than Washington at this point, calling for a 40-10 USC victory on the road in Washington. So there's the picks for this weekend. It's a great matchup of college football, so we want you to stay with us all week at GoForThe2.com.